Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
You ever try to stay calm for months on end while your neighbors slowly treat you like you're invisible? Not in some abstract emotional sense either, I mean, like, your actual physical space no longer exists to them. That was me, standing in my living room one Wednesday morning, sipping my coffee and watching Dave's oversized work truck reverse into my driveway like he owned it. And right before he shut the door, he gave me the same casual shrug he always did and shouted up to my window, "Just for a minute, Mike." Except we both knew damn well what that meant. That minute would stretch into 35, maybe even an hour. Long enough for him to run in, take a shower, yell at Cheryl, probably microwave some crap, and forget all about the truck blocking my own way out. Again. The worst part? This had become normal. Not just Dave. Cheryl, too. Hell, even their grown-ass daughter had done it once when she dropped off the grandkids. Then next thing I know, Kyle, the punk 17-year-old next door, starts parking his little rust bucket Honda right up against my garage door while he runs inside to grab his vape or whatever excuse he came up with that day. "Just for a minute," he said. "Chill, it's not like you're going anywhere." He said that to my face. Like I was some retired ghost just floating around in a house with no life or purpose. Thing is, I work from home. Been doing it long before the pandemic made it trendy. My office window faces the street, so I see everything: who walks their dog, who double parks, who lets their kids dump half a popsicle on my mailbox. I pay my mortgage, taxes, shovel my driveway in winter, salt the steps, mow my lawn every Saturday morning like a goddamn patriot. But slowly, this driveway thing became a daily offense that eroded my patience like water wearing down rock. One disrespectful drop at a time. It started small, like everything does. First time Cheryl parked there, it was because the garbage trucks had blocked her side of the street. "Just for a sec, Mike. You're a lifesaver." And I thought, you know what, fine. We're neighbors. We help each other out. One time. Second time, Dave said he had groceries to unload. 15 minutes later, I see him drinking a beer on his porch, watching a football game through the screen door while my Amazon package gets bounced back because the driver couldn't pull into my blocked driveway. Third time, Dave's cousin left his car there while they went to the lake. Overnight. I knocked. Cheryl answered. "Oh, he'll be back before you even notice," she said like I was the overreacting type. I stared past her at the car still sitting there with a crusty fast food bag on the dash and a parking ticket tucked under the wiper. I tried being nice. Hell, I was nice. I left a note on the windshield once. Just a polite reminder that this was private property and I'd appreciate a heads up before anyone parked there. The note vanished. 2 days later, Dave asked if I was feeling lonely since I'd taken to writing little letters. The first time I really lost it, I was waiting for a grocery delivery, one of those big box orders that fills your fridge for the week. I timed it out perfectly. Got the frozen stuff pre-cleared, organized the fridge. Had my dog locked up so he wouldn't run out. Then I hear the truck outside honk once and drive off. I sprint out there barefoot, yelling like an idiot down the block. The driver points to my driveway, completely blocked by Cheryl's sedan. Not a soul in sight. Cheryl wasn't even home. I called her. Straight to voicemail. So I'm standing there with no groceries, sun baking my driveway, sweating through my shirt, and something in me just kind of snaps. You know that feeling when someone pushes you too far, but in such tiny increments you don't even realize how far you've been pushed until there's nowhere left to go? That was me. I went back inside, poured a tall glass of cheap whiskey over ice, sat down at my laptop, and started Googling what to do when someone parks in your driveway repeatedly. Most of the advice was useless. Talk to them, they said. Already did that. Post a sign, they said. I had one faded and ignored. Then, tucked deep in a forum for small landlords and property owners, I found something that made my heart rate slow just a little. A single line in a thread titled "Creative Enforcement." If it's private property, you can rent it to a tow company. Rent it to a tow company. I didn't even know that was a thing. But apparently, some local tow companies have this little arrangement. They sign a contract with you, slap a reserved tow zone, sign on your spot, and wait for the call. No warnings, no games. You just text them when a car shows up and they come haul it off. Legal, clean, beautifully impersonal. I called 3 companies before I found one that worked my area. The guy on the phone, name was Rick, sounded like he smoked 3 packs a day and didn't believe in small talk. You got pictures? Send me the layout. We'll get the sign up by Monday. It cost me a monthly fee that was less than what I pay for internet, and in return, I got a laminated sign, legal documents posted on the edge of the drive, and the sweetest new contact in my phone, tow guy. By Monday afternoon, it was official. My driveway was no longer a neighborhood dumping ground. It was a trap. A legal, glorious trap. And all I had to do was wait. That night, as I watched Dave pull into my driveway again like nothing had changed, I didn't even move. I waited until he disappeared inside, laughing on the phone with someone. Then I took a sip of whiskey, opened my phone, and texted Rick one word. Now. That's when I made the call to the one company every neighbor on the street would soon learn to fear. The first tow was like opening a forbidden box I didn't know I'd enjoy so damn much. There was something primal, almost satisfying, about the way that flatbed truck crept into my driveway like a predator and hooked itself under Dave's big silver F-150 as casually as if it was lifting a bag of groceries. Rick, the tow guy I had spoken with, didn't even get out of the truck to chat. He just nodded when I pointed, reversed in with practiced precision, and had the thing gone in under 10 minutes. I watched from my upstairs office window, mug of coffee in hand, wearing a bathrobe and socks, feeling like some suburban Bond villain pulling strings from his lair. The kind of guy who doesn't get mad anymore, just even. It took Dave 20 full minutes to even notice. He came out in gym shorts and flip-flops, holding a protein shake and talking on his phone, walking toward his truck like everything was normal. The slow turn of his head, the dawning realization as he faced nothing but a patch of dry concrete, was worth every cent of that towing contract. He looked around like maybe it had disappeared into the earth, like some sinkhole had opened up under his damn ego and swallowed it whole. Then, when he finally saw the posted sign, bright red and white, bolted into the fence line, reading Private Drive, towing enforced at all times, he marched straight across the street to my door. Now I knew this was coming, so I was ready. I didn't answer the door, just let him bang on it like a caveman for about 5 minutes while I sat in my chair and recorded it all on my phone. When he finally gave up, stomping back to Cheryl with steam coming out of his ears, I peeked out again just in time to see him dialing his phone. Probably trying to call the cops. But there's one thing Dave didn't know. When the tow company showed up, they left a paper notice on his windshield and took pictures of the car in the driveway, along with the posted sign and the time-stamped contract. Legally, I was airtight. The thing is, once the first car goes, word spreads. But apparently not fast enough for Cheryl. 2 days later, she swung into my driveway like she always did, probably thinking she had immunity by marriage or nostalgia or whatever imaginary sense of entitlement she carried around. I waited for her to go inside, 10 minutes flat, then texted Rick again. His reply? On my way. Just 3 words. But they gave me more satisfaction than any neighborly conversation ever had. Cheryl didn't scream when she realized her car was gone. She cried. Real, shoulder-shaking sobs, right there in the middle of her perfectly manicured lawn, while Dave shouted on the phone with someone and pointed across the street like I was the devil himself. I stayed inside, quiet, sipping coffee again. Not proud, not smug, just justified. Then Kyle's mom showed up. Parked for literally 5 minutes while she dropped off a lasagna at Cheryl's. I watched her ring the bell, hand it over, give Cheryl a pity hug. And I knew what came next. Tow number 3. That's when I started keeping a tally on my office whiteboard. I labeled it Victory Points. Underneath, I drew a little smiley face with sharp teeth. It wasn't about rage anymore. It was strategy, balance, karma, maybe. A small correction to the universe. Each car that got towed wasn't just a win, it was an answer to every ignored warning, every passive-aggressive smirk, every, just for a minute, that turned into a 45-minute blockade of my damn life. By the end of the week, I had 5 cars towed. In just 3 days, I had 5 cars towed. That's almost 2 cars a day. It was fast, clean, and by the book. I never saw the same mistake made twice. But I did see the looks. The sideways glances while I walked my dog. The awkward pauses when I showed up at the mailbox while neighbors were chatting. They were starting to talk, probably whispering about how Mike had lost it, how Mike had gone full psycho. But not one of them parked in my driveway again. What really stuck with me, though, was how quickly the tone of the street changed. People who used to wave suddenly forgot how hands worked. Folks who used to ask about my weekend now crossed the street like I was contagious. I wasn't part of the club anymore. Not that I ever wanted to be. But it was like watching the masks peel off. For the first time, I realized how fake it had all been. The smiles, the banter, the shared 4th of July block parties. None of it mattered once you threatened someone's convenience. Still, I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. One night, around 10:30, I was locking up the back door when I caught something in the corner of my eye, movement by the front yard, too fast to be an animal, too big to be wind. I stepped outside, barefoot on the concrete, and saw a figure, hooded, hunched dart across my lawn and disappear into the shadows near Cheryl's fence. I shouted once. No answer. Just silence, thick and still, as if the whole neighborhood was holding its breath. I circled the yard, flashlight in hand, checking every bush and corner. Nothing. But when I came back around to the porch, I saw it. My garden gnome, the one my ex-wife gave me as a joke, the one with the stupid fishing pole and the dumb red hat, was smashed into a dozen jagged ceramic pieces. Someone had lobbed it off the porch steps like it meant something. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about cars anymore. This wasn't about driveways or towing fees. This had turned into a quiet war. A war of glances and whispers and little midnight messages sent in the form of broken lawn ornaments. A war that didn't need noise to be loud. And I had a feeling the next move was already on its way. The day after I found my gnome shattered like a warning left by some budget mafia, I drove straight to the hardware store and bought 2 security cameras, motion-activated floodlights, and enough zip ties to build a damn fortress if I wanted to. There was something deeply unsettling about not knowing who had stepped onto my lawn under the cover of darkness, who had stood there quietly enough to not trip my senses, but bold enough to send a message in ceramic shards. And it wasn't just paranoia anymore, it was escalation, plain and simple. Something had shifted on the street, and I wasn't about to sit back while it turned into a playground for passive-aggressive vengeance. I mounted one camera above the garage, aimed low enough to catch the full spread of the driveway and street. The second went near the porch, angled to watch the front steps and yard. I didn't bother hiding them. In fact, I kind of wanted the neighborhood to see. Let them wonder what else I was watching. Let them feel the same creeping discomfort they had been so casually tossing my way. Within a few days, the difference in tone was undeniable. Where I used to get small waves or awkward smiles from neighbors, I now got nothing but silence or half-hearted nods. Cheryl no longer made eye contact when getting the mail. Dave pretended he didn't hear me when I walked by with my dog. Kyle? That little twerp went from blasting music in his driveway to lowering it to a whisper when I walked past. It would have been funny if it didn't feel so charged, like the air itself had thickened. The little jabs came next. I'd walk my dog, Baxter, and someone, usually Janet, the woman at the end of the cul-de-sac who thinks being the president of the informal HOA makes her the neighborhood queen, would make pointed comments like, "Some people sure know how to bring down the whole vibe around here," or, "I guess we can't all be friendly anymore, huh?" She even had the gall to say, loud enough for me to hear, that maybe the street was becoming unsafe because someone had turned vindictive. She didn't say my name, but she didn't have to. Everyone knew exactly who she meant. Trash started showing up on my lawn. Not much at first, just a fast food wrapper here, a crushed soda can there, but it was enough to notice. One morning I stepped out and found an empty dog poop bag hanging from my mailbox like it was a gift. Another time, someone poured coffee grounds down my driveway, staining the concrete. I checked the cameras, but whoever did it was careful, always out of frame or disguised in the shadows. The worst part? My car tires. Slashed. Not popped, not accidentally punctured, but intentionally and precisely slashed. All four. My old Honda might not look like much, but she runs like a dream, and seeing her crippled like that made my stomach twist. The police report didn't do much, just another incident number on a long list. No suspects. No witnesses. No help. Still, I towed. That part never stopped. If anything, I doubled down. By now I had 9 cars towed, 9 distinct instances of neighbors either thinking I was bluffing or too tired to follow through. But I never hesitated. Rick from the tow company had me on speed dial, and every time he showed up, he did his job with cold efficiency. He even started calling my place the honeypot, like it was some kind of urban trap for suburban stupidity. At some point, they started a group chat without me. I found out because Kyle's mom accidentally mentioned something from the block thread during a tense conversation at the mailbox. When I asked what she meant, she froze for a second, smiled nervously, and said, "Oh, just some local updates. Nothing big." But it was big. I wasn't just the odd one out. I was the villain of the story now, and they were building their own little alliance behind my back. Janet eventually worked up the courage to knock on my door, clipboard in hand, her face twisted into that fake concern people wear when they're about to insult you, but want it to sound like advice. She told me there had been talk of filing a formal complaint with the town council, that I was creating hostility and alienating the community. When I asked her what laws I'd broken, she flinched. I could tell she didn't have an answer. She mumbled something about harassment, about being unneighborly, whatever the hell that means in a place where everyone expects you to bend over backward for people who can't even bother asking for permission. I told her I had documentation for everything: photos, timestamps, the full contract with the towing company. I even had printed screenshots from public town bylaws highlighting my rights as a homeowner. I was ready for her crusade. She left without another word, but not before muttering something about, "You'll see." That's when I started a new folder on my laptop. I called it Suburban Vengeance. Inside went every clip, every note, every small infraction I caught on camera. I didn't plan to use it for anything yet, but the act of building it felt like claiming back some control. A paper trail of pettiness, sure, but also a record of how people lose their damn minds when they're told no. And then it came. Quiet, plain, and chilling. One afternoon, I opened my mailbox expecting a water bill or maybe another community newsletter packed with nonsense. Instead, I found a white envelope. No name, no return address. Just my house number scrawled in a rushed hand. Inside, one piece of paper. No threats. No demands. Just a single sentence in thick black Sharpie. "You think this is over?" No signature. No smiley face. Just that cold, bold line staring back at me like it was daring me to keep going. And in that moment, I realized something that hadn't hit me before. Not only had the war officially begun, but I wasn't even sure anymore who started it. It was early Saturday morning when I found the invitation stuck to my front door like some passive-aggressive badge of honor, written on one of those neon sticky notes that can't help but look hostile, even when the handwriting tries to play nice. In bold, bubbly letters it read, "Neighborhood Gathering, Janet's Backyard, Saturday 6 p.m. Let's clear the air," with a little smiley face in the corner that felt less friendly and more like a threat dressed in cheer. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a signature to know exactly who had written it. Janet had that kind of handwriting, flourished, controlled, and fake as a plastic lawn flamingo. I stood there on the porch with the note between my fingers, the breeze tugging at it slightly, and I felt this heavy knot start to form in my chest. A meeting? Really? After all the whispered crap, the backhanded comments, the broken gnome, and the anonymous threats in my mailbox, now they wanted to sit down? It wasn't about conversation, it was about spectacle. And I knew, the second I read it, that I'd be the main attraction. Still, I went. Not because I cared what they thought or because I was desperate to clear the air, but because I knew this wasn't just a gathering. It was a war council, and I wasn't about to let them rewrite the narrative without me in the room. So I put on a clean shirt, ran a comb through my hair, and walked the 3 houses down to Janet's backyard like a man stepping into enemy territory. Baxter stayed behind. Even he didn't need to be part of the circus. Janet's yard looked like it was ripped straight out of a magazine spread about fake suburban unity, plastic folding chairs in a circle, a cooler full of off-brand sodas, a table with mismatched snacks and napkins that read, "Let's talk it out," in cursive. Half the neighborhood was already there by the time I arrived. Cheryl and Dave sat side by side, arms crossed, radiating disapproval. Kyle lounged in a chair like he was at a cookout, phone in hand, chewing gum like he was born to be obnoxious. A few others lingered around the edges, some curious, some cautious, but all with that same shared look in their eyes like they were waiting for the show to start. Janet cleared her throat in that performative way she always does when she wants the room's attention and gestured to the seat across from her, the one perfectly centered in the circle. Of course that's where she wanted me, dead center, like I was on trial. "I think we all know why we're here," she began, her voice sweetened with faux concern but sharp enough to cut. "Things have gotten a little tense lately, and I think it's time we heard each other out." One by one, they took turns unloading. Cheryl started with her usual flair, throwing in words like community, trust, and tradition, like seasoning on a bland casserole. She said I had undermined the spirit of the street, that I was turning the neighborhood into a hostile place, and that my actions had made people feel unsafe. I almost laughed. Unsafe? From what? Consequences? Dave chimed in next, less polished and more blunt. "You've got small man energy," he said with a smirk, leaning back in his chair like he was dropping some kind of philosophical truth bomb. "This whole thing? Over a driveway? You really think this makes you the hero?" Kyle didn't even pretend to participate constructively. He just muttered, "Whatever, man," under his breath and went back to his phone, snickering as if all of this was just a TikTok skit he was watching unfold. I let them talk. I let them pile it on, one after another, each complaint more self-serving than the last. And when it finally looped back to Janet, when she gave me that practice smile and said, "Mike, we'd love to hear your side now," I stood up. Not because I needed to loom over them, but because my words needed to carry. "You know what?" I said, voice calm but sharp enough to cut through the heat. "I've lived here for 5 years. Paid my bills. Mowed my lawn. Kept to myself. Never asked any of you for anything. All I ever wanted was a little respect. A basic human courtesy. But for months, you treated my property like it was your overflow lot. Just for a minute, right?" That was the phrase. Just for a minute became 30, became an hour, became overnight. And when I asked nicely, when I tried to be decent about it, you laughed. Shrugged. Ignored me. Until one day I said enough's enough. I didn't vandalize. I didn't scream. I followed the rules. I signed a contract. And suddenly I'm the villain. A few people looked down. A couple of the newer residents shifted awkwardly. I could see a flicker of uncertainty ripple through the crowd. But then Cheryl stood up. And she smiled. That kind of smile that lets you know there's a knife coming right after it. "You know, Mike," she said, her voice dripping with false politeness, "I never told you this before, because I didn't think it was necessary, but the woman who owned your house before you, Mrs. Gates? She and I had an arrangement. She used to let us park in the driveway whenever we needed to. She said we could use it. That it was no big deal." She looked around at the group for backup, as if this imaginary verbal contract with a woman who hadn't owned the house in years somehow justified all the entitlement. "That spot was practically ours," she added, with that same smug tilt of her chin. "You might own the property now, Mike. But you don't own the spirit of the driveway." For a moment, I said nothing. I looked at her, really looked, and I saw the whole game. It had never been about parking. It had been about control. Territory. Their comfort, their convenience, and how dare I disrupt it. Janet clapped her hands together lightly. Okay, let's not get too heated. But maybe there's a middle ground here. What if we talk to the city? Maybe there's a way to declare the driveway as a shared access point. That could be a compromise. A few people nodded. Not many, but enough to make my blood pressure spike. They were really going to try it. They were going to vote to take my driveway because their fragile little sense of neighborhood entitlement had been bruised. And I stood there, stunned, as Janet said, all in favor of exploring a petition. Hands began to rise, one by one. And all I could think was, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The thing about suburban wars is that they don't end with a bang or a blaze. They just quietly shift into the next uneasy chapter, like a chess game where neither player can admit it's over. After the backyard meeting, after they actually dared to raise their hands in favor of stealing my goddamn driveway by petitioning the city for shared access, I expected retaliation to come quick and ugly. But instead, nothing happened. Days passed. Then a week. Then another. The silence was almost worse than the petty trash drops or the slashed tires. At least when things were happening, you knew who you were dealing with and what direction the fire was coming from. But this? This was stillness with teeth. A quiet I didn't trust for a second. I didn't hear the official news about the petition failing, but I could piece it together from the clues. The city inspector never showed. No forms were mailed. No one from the zoning board ever contacted me. And then I overheard Dave muttering something in the grocery store parking lot while talking to one of his construction buddies on speakerphone, something about the plan being dead in the water, and how they'll wish they'd kept their mouths shut. That was all the confirmation I needed. The city told them no, and I imagine they weren't too gentle about it either. Driveways are private property. End of story. But just because the official route failed didn't mean they were done with me. That much I knew in my bones. I started prepping like I was expecting a siege, and honestly, I kind of was. I added 2 more cameras, one above the back gate, one watching the alley between my house and Cheryl's. I changed all my locks, installed motion sensors in the yard, and finally upgraded my garage door keypad. I even replaced the porch light with one of those smart ones you can control from your phone. It all felt over the top, sure, but I'd been the polite neighbor before, and all that got me was a broken gnome and a mailbox full of anonymous threats. Every time I walked Baxter, I scanned the corners, checked for new tire marks in the grass, fresh footprints in the flower beds. My sleep was shallow. Every noise in the night felt like the start of something. And the worst part was, I didn't know what they were planning. Janet had gone quiet. Cheryl wasn't parking in front of my house anymore. Dave had stopped yelling across the street. The stillness wasn't peace, it was staging. Then came the knock. It wasn't loud. Just a soft, polite tap. The kind you'd use if you were borrowing sugar. But I felt it before I heard it, like a shift in the air pressure inside the house. I was sitting in my office, writing up an email for work when I froze mid-sentence. 3 taps. Then nothing. I stood slowly, glanced at the monitor with the camera feed from the porch, and my stomach dropped. Cheryl, Janet, and Dave, all standing there, side by side like the damn suburban trinity, their hands clasped awkwardly in front of them, faces tight and unreadable. My first thought? They were here to deliver some ridiculous apology laced with conditions, or worse, here to announce some new stunt designed to corner me. Maybe they brought a lawyer. Maybe they found some obscure city code. Maybe they were just here to gloat. But when I opened the door, everything about the scene defied my expectations. Cheryl's eyes were red, not from makeup, but from crying. Dave wasn't posturing or puffed up. He looked hollowed out, like he hadn't slept in days. Janet, for once, wasn't carrying a clipboard or a smug expression. She just looked tired. "Can we talk?" Cheryl asked softly, her voice shaking around the edges like she was holding something back but losing grip fast. I didn't say anything, just stepped aside and let them in. I didn't know why. Maybe curiosity. Maybe power. Maybe something softer I didn't want to admit. We sat at my kitchen table like it was neutral ground, the 3 of them on one side, me on the other. For a minute, no one said anything. Then Cheryl spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's Kyle," she said, looking down at her hands. "He was out last night. Driving. Too fast. There was an accident." Dave jumped in, trying to finish the thought, but his voice cracked. Someone got hit. A guy walking his dog. Kyle says it wasn't him. But he matches the car description. And he was out at the time. They weren't asking for forgiveness. They weren't here to confess. They were here because they needed something. They needed my cameras. You've got footage, right? Janet asked, her voice suddenly businesslike again. You've got the alley view. The street. We need to know if it was him. I stared at them. After all the games, all the fake smiles and behind-the-back whispers, after the meeting where they tried to take my land, now they needed my help? Now, with something real on the line, they remembered I existed? Everything inside me wanted to say no. Not even a dramatic no. Just a cold, quiet door closing in their faces. It would have been so easy. So clean. The final act of revenge, poetic and powerful. You didn't respect my space, now you don't get my footage. Simple. But something about Cheryl's face gave me pause. Something about Dave's slumped shoulders and Janet's desperate tone twisted my stomach in a way that didn't feel like victory. I stood up without a word, walked to my office, and pulled up the feed from the previous night. I scrubbed through the timestamp. Midnight. 1 a.m. A blur of headlights. A car. Kyle's car? Maybe. Hard to say. Then a flash of movement. A figure darting into the frame. Tires squealing. A stumble. Then the screen went still. They all gathered around, silent, watching the same thing I watched. No one said anything. Not when the screen went black. Not when I finally turned off the monitor. Not even when Cheryl started crying again, this time with no sound. I leaned back in my chair, stared at the three of them sitting in my office, and said nothing for a long moment. Funny how it takes a tragedy for people to remember where the lines are drawn. But even now, I can't help but wonder, did I become the villain in all this? Or just the one who finally said enough?